we here at the Washington Post have a very interesting editorial. Dominic, you've been crunching the numbers about where all the tax money comes in from. Why don't you talk us through it?
Sure. You'll hear it often. The rich don't pay their fair share in taxes. It's never really clear what people mean by the rich or what they mean by fair share. And so if you just look at the data right from the IRS from 2023, you'll see that there are about 30,000 people in the United States who make over $10 million a year, right? So these are the very richest people. And those 30,000 people, which is less than it's less than 0.5% of all taxpayers. They pay about 10% of all income taxes, right? So this tiny group of people pays about 10%. And if you broaden it out a little bit more than that, and you look at, all people who make over $100,000, let's say, that's about a quarter of all taxpayers in the United States. And they pay almost all income taxes, 87%.
We've got the chart up here. Yep.
They pay 87% of income taxes, right? So people making over $100,000. So the 3/4 of American taxpayers who make under $100,000 are barely paying anything in income tax. Now, that's not to say that they're freeloaders, right? Because they pay sales tax to the states, they pay payroll tax.
They're paying their tax, yeah.
They pay lots of different taxes, but on the income tax question, which is the tax that is designed to be progressive, which means that it's supposed to take more from rich people and less from poor people, it's very progressive. It is doing that job. And so people who talk about the desire to make the income tax more progressive usually don't have as their starting point that we already have a very progressive income tax. Mm-hmm. And if you compare it to other countries too, it's much more progressive than in other places. And really, if you look at what's being undertaxed right now, if you wanted to raise more money, the best place to go would be the upper middle class, not the super rich. The upper middle class is where you have a large amount of money that is being taxed at a relatively low rate compared to the way that the very richest people are being taxed. And now politicians really don't want to do that because America has a lot of upper middle class people already, and we have even more people who want to become upper middle class, and that's really the message that politicians want to sell is you too someday can become upper middle class. And so that's a really unpopular group of people to tax. But it's the one that would make the most sense if you actually wanted to raise revenue.
I think a big issue is that politicians, when they'll say the rich need to pay their fair share, the average voter thinks, yes, the rich is defined as everyone who makes more than me. Rich begins as soon as you make more than I do, but it will adjust upward as I get raises and stuff.
Yeah.
The rich are always people who are richer than me, so not me. And fair share is not, it's more, right? But not all of it. Whereas the politicians who are saying fair share, what they really mean is everything. Bernie wants all of it. And so when you say, oh, okay, yeah, it's very progressive, he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. That's cool that they pay. Pull the bars up again. So it's like, all right, you're making $1 million a year. You're basically contributing double based on the amount of money you're taking in versus the amount of money you're paying. It's about double. That's not enough. We want all of it. And voters don't think that because I think voters don't think that that's what they really mean, but it is what they mean. They're not just looking for, another 5%. That's the opening bid. But ultimately, they don't believe that there should be any rich people. It'd be a better country if we were all more poor and more equal, which is how someone like Bernie Sanders could look at, or AOC could look at Cuba and be like, basically successful except for what America did. At least everybody's equal. And
Right.
that's what this is really about, not about growth or...
Equality matters. Well, prosperity doesn't matter. Equality is the only thing that matters.
Exactly.
And if you achieve that, then that's the outcome. I think one of the most misleading parts of this messaging is that they talk about, well, if you were to tax the very rich, the billionaires, much, much more, and have a real progressive tax system, it's not progressive enough, then you could pay for all of these social services. Well, if you look at the countries that actually provide very generous social services, particularly the ones that do it better than others, the ones where you as a person can actually show up and claim some of this, they're taxing the middle class. Right?
Yeah.
They're taxing the aspirational folk that you spoke about, but they're taxing people in lower tax brackets too.
Of course.
They are taxing average earners in order to pay for that. And that's never really part of this discussion. The assumption is you could have all of these free things if we tax these billionaires more. But there aren't countries that are funding their social services through that mechanism.
Because people can intuit that the government's not good at doing that. But, so they're like, oh, I'm not going to give you half of my income just so that you could light it on fire with your dumb programs. But taking all of it from that rich guy, maybe you'll lose some of it, but at least some of that will get to people eventually, right?
Yeah, even if it's highly efficient. From the
as long as someone else is paying, it's okay. But the second you start talking about their own money, people, it's the classic thing. You get your first paycheck and you're like, that much? And it's not that much if you're not earning a lot, but it's a lot to you because it's going to be wasted by the government.
And you worked for it. You remember the hours you put in to earn it.
And on the social services side of the equation, too, it depends on which ones you're talking about, right? If you look at the social services we have for seniors, for example, those are oftentimes more generous than in a lot of those countries that tax average workers at higher rates. If you look at some of the benefits we have for children, some of those are less generous than those other countries have. But it's not like we have a small welfare state in this country either. And so the fact that we have been able to actually have as large a welfare state as we have without taxing average earners at very high rates is really actually a really remarkable starting point. And again, if that's your idea of a successful country, a country with a very progressive income tax and a large welfare state, you should have some honesty and say, well, the U.S. is already pretty far down that road, and maybe you want to make it better and you want to change it. I can understand that, but to have that as your starting point, America is this incredible laissez-faire country where the rich have all the money and we don't tax them at all and we don't have any social services. That's just wrong.
Yeah, and the political coalitions are changing between the parties too. So you had Joe Biden who swore up and down he would never raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is that, like, a lot of the people who were, Bernie Sanders used to always talk about the millionaires and the billionaires. Now he just talks about the billionaires because he is a millionaire. Like, that's partly because of growth that he tried to smother.
Well, it's partly because he's an effective capitalist.
Right,
I mean,
I can't remember when it was, but someone asked him about that, and he's like, "Well, if you write a best-selling book, you can also be a millionaire."
Hey, good for you.
It's like they always get it right until
Right up until you're so close.
Almost
One
get
more
it.
step.
Yeah, you were disproportionately rewarded for your.
But that band, and there are exit polls and stuff. That band of 200K to 500K, which is, that is a meaningful part. Those are people who voted for Mitt Romney in 2012 and Kamala Harris in 2024. Not all of them, but that's where you saw,
on
I
average,
think, the biggest shift.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the challenge. I mean, not to defend Bernie, but like they're being honest that what they want. I mean, they're not being honest about wanting to confiscate everyone's money, which is what they want to do. But they're being honest that, like, their big ideas cost a lot of money. Most partisans, most lawmakers want to just sort of hand wave and pretend that we can afford a European-style safety net without taxing those people who are earning between $100,000 and $500,000 a year, and that is a lie.
And on the flip side, we on the right, they talk about tax cuts without addressing the spending side of the ledger.
Because they're not willing to cut the spending.
Exactly.
But they do want to cut the taxes because everyone wants to.
Yeah, well, and then the new innovation, because our deficit's not messed up enough, is that increasingly Dems are saying, let's just cut taxes. We'll make it more progressive by having people, I think in California, Katie Porter, the gubernatorial candidate, no one will get state income tax who earns below $100K a year. So Democrats want to increase it on the rich and at the same time cut taxes for whatever arbitrary point that they think is not rich.
And California is especially bad on that. I mean, their state income tax is even more progressive than the federal income tax is, to the point where you can basically predict a big chunk of their trends in revenue by just looking at the stock market, because the investment income from the very top earners in the state has a huge impact on how much revenue the entire state has. And there's always going to be some of that in any tax system, because when the stock market does well, people have more income. But if you look at it on the federal level, it's nothing compared to California. And I don't know, personally, if I think it's really important for the state to fund social services, I don't want to only be able to do it in years when the stock market does well.
That's a good rule to live by, I suppose, if you're a state politician.